Hey guys, tonight we begin behind high stone walls, where candles flicker, veils whisper, and parchment waits patiently in a carved wooden chest. You step softly into a cloister where moonlight spills through narrow arches, glinting off sand-scuffed floors and calloused knuckles folded in prayer. It's quiet, except for the occasional scrape of sandal leather and the low hum of a hymn drifting down from the chapel. But under this silence is a pulse warm and strange. Tonight, you're not just wandering through a medieval convent, you're threading the needle between devotion and desire, between holy vows and something that smells suspiciously like longing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The linen hangs low across your brow as you adjust the wimple. Scratchy. It always is, no matter how many times. Sister Ameline claims she's softened the starch with lavender water. You suspect she just likes watching you twitch through lauds. You pad through the cloister arcade, hands folded like you mean it. The arches cast angled shadows that tilt toward the courtyard's fountain, where water gurgles its gentle midnight monologue. Sister Beatrix is already there, pretending to be lost in reflection, but she glances up just enough to check your gait. You're being watched. Always. Even when no one says anything. The chapel bell has rung, but no one moves quickly. That's the trick. Hurry, and you look guilty. Drag your feet, and you risk penance. You find the rhythm of obedience steady, even like a procession of ghosts in woolen robes. The corridor to the chapel smells faintly of tallow and thyme. A draft tickles your neck. Maybe it's just wind. Maybe not. The abbey's walls are thick with memory. You swear you've heard sighs in these halls, and not always the kind meant for saints. In the chapel, Sister Marie plucks at the psalter strings, her fingers nimble and slightly ink-stained. She's the chronicler of dreams, or so the younger novices whisper. Her hymns always drift into strange keys when the moon is full. No one dares ask why. Tonight, Vespers is brief. A storm threatens, and Father Augustine doesn't like thunder in the middle of a Magnificat. You light your candle from Sister Gertrude's and pass it on with a practiced nod. The wax drips on your hand. You don't flinch. After prayers, everyone disperses, but you linger. The cloister garden beckons, walled, fragrant, silvered by moonlight. The lavender glows faintly. The night air is cool against your cheeks. Here your thoughts can stretch. A moth flutters past its wings, brushed with moon. It makes you think of the poem Sister Hildegard recited last week, something about longing veiled in Latin, too slippery to be strictly devotional. You're starting to understand the code. Desire, it turns out, has many disguises. The tower bell strikes once. You're expected in the dormitory, but your feet don't move. Not yet. Not when the world is soft and silver and the sky feels so close you could pluck it with your bare fingers. You look up. The moon stares back round and impassive. You imagine what it must be like to float above this abbey, to see its garden geometry from above, the chalk paths, the rosemary hedges, the nuns with secrets tucked inside their sleeves. Maybe the moon knows every line of every poem ever hidden under a mattress. You draw your shawl tighter. The wind's picked up, and with it a new smell, burned parchment rose oil. Hard to say, but it pricks something old in your chest. Sister Isabel once said the veil doesn't just cover the head, it's a filter, a way to re-see the world. Back then, you nodded. Tonight, you wonder if it's also a curtain, something you can peek through if you dare. The garden door creaks behind you. You turn slow and practiced. Just Sister Odile, back from tending the infirmary. She meets your gaze for a breath too long. Then she's gone, and so are you, melting into the hallway with the practiced grace of someone who knows what it means to linger and live. You settle into your straw-stuffed mattress like it's a bed of feathers, though every vertebra disagrees. The dormitory smells of beeswax, clean linen, and the faintest hint of feet, real life, softened by sanctity. Around you, the others are already curled in the practiced stillness of vowed women. One sister mumbles a final prayer in her sleep. Another snores gently like a dove with sinus congestion. You lie on your side eyes, fixed on the timber ceiling, its beams blackened by centuries of candle soot. There's a knot in one beam that looks suspiciously like a grinning face. You try not to see it. Tonight is not a night for faces watching. Eventually you drift, not into sleep exactly, but into that strange half-world between dreaming and listening. The rain begins a soft tap-tap against the shutters, the kind of rain that makes secrets want to speak. You remember the tale Sister Constance told last winter, the one about the nun who vanished through a crack in the wall? She loved the rose window more than the rule. Constance had whispered eyes too bright for the firelight. It let her see the stars. You try not to think about cracks. At some unknowable hour, your eyes flutter open. A rustle, not from inside, from the cloister walk. Not loud, just intentional, like someone stepping around a puddle. You know better than to sit up suddenly. Instead, you let your breathing slow into a careful mimic of sleep. The rustling pauses, then resumes. It moves past the dormitory wall, continues toward the scriptorium. You tell yourself it's the wind. You almost believe it. Morning comes with a grimace and cold toes. You rise when the bell tolls, same as always. The hallway stones are damp. No one mentions the rain. No one ever does. The refectory is quiet. Bread porridge and stewed apples. The apples are tart overcooked just the way Sister Marguerite insists they should be for spiritual discipline. You chew without complaint. Complaints like jam are luxuries. Then it begins. The weekly inspection. Father Augustine appears in the doorway like mildew expected unwelcome and impossible to scrub away. His robes are dusty at the hem, which somehow makes him more threatening. You swear he smiles at suffering. Maybe he collects it. He stalks the rows like a crow in cassock black. His eyes land on you for half a heartbeat longer than necessary. You lower your gaze. Good. Not too low. Better. Today he's inspecting for signs of laxity. No one knows what that means. Last time it was a cracked icon. Before that, a misplaced candle snuffer. Once Sister Agnes was cited for humming during embroidery. She hadn't realized. She still doesn't sing. He pauses behind you. You tense. A breath hitches. His voice is syrupy and sour. Sister, your sash is uneven. You want to scream. You want to correct him. You want to vanish. Instead, you nod. Adjust it precisely and whisper a thank you, Father, with a smile so mild it could be milk. He moves on. Someone at the next table exhales. Later in the scriptorium, you try to forget. The ink smells sharp, and the vellum is surprisingly soft beneath your fingers. You've been assigned marginalia tiny floral patterns to frame a psalm about forgiveness. Irony. Possibly. You dip your quill. The lines must be clean. No smudges, no corrections. There's no parchment for second chances. Sister Marie leans over your shoulder at one point. Lovely, she says, tapping a golden bud with her finger. Her hands smell faintly of lemon balm. She lingers, a moment too long. You don't look up, but you feel it, that strange pulse behind her words. At a moth, she murmurs. In the lower margin, just there. You pause. Why? She shrugs. Because even quiet things should be seen. You add the moth. Outside, the rain returns. This time, heavier, angrier. The roof creaks. A bolt of wind howls down the flue, scattering soot over a half-finished page. Someone curses under her breath. Then, silence. Father Augustine is not pleased. By evening, the scriptorium is closed for discipline. You are reassigned to laundry. Cold water and wool sleeves. You scrub robes until your knuckles ache. The water is bone-numbing. You try to count the clouds reflected in the washtub. You lose count at 8. Sister Beatrix works beside you. She sings a hymn under her breath. This time no one stops her. At dinner the apples are gone. In their place boiled parsnips, punishment food. You chew in silence. Across the hall, Sister Marie catches your eye. She raises a brow, moth-shaped. You nearly smile. That night you dream of cracks in walls and moths with golden wings. You wake just before dawn, lips parted in a half-whispered psalm you've never learned. The morning bell finds you already half-dressed, your fingers lacing the final knot of your sash with practiced care. The dormitory remains hushed, save for the gentle clink of a buckle and the shuffle of linen on straw. Sunlight filters through the high-arched windows in streaks, casting long golden bars across the floor like some silent cage. You always rise before the others now, not from piety, from habit, and maybe a little fear. You kneel beside your cot and mouth a brief prayer, not from the breviary, just one you made up months ago. It goes something like, "Please let today be boring." You're rarely so lucky. In the cloister walk, the air is brisk, biting at your cheeks. The stone corridor is quiet, echoing only the rhythmic scuff of sandals and the distant creak of weathered doors. You pass Sister Agnes, who's carrying a basket of spindles. She nods. You nod. There is comfort in predictable nods. Today is market day, and though you won't be going beyond the walls, the energy inside the abbey subtly shifts. Carts will arrive. Coins will jingle. The world will press against your sacred bubble like a nose on cold glass. You're assigned to assist at the guest entrance. Oh, joy! Father Augustine, who for some reason always appears when hope flutters briefly into your chest, assigns you with a smile that feels like a trap. Make sure the merchants remove their hats, he says, voice like a splinter under a fingernail. And be wary of those who smile too easily. They often hide rotting fruit. You resist the urge to point out that he too smiles easily. The gate is smaller than it looks in your mind, less a grand portal, more a creaky wooden promise of rules. You stand beside Sister Theodora, who is so unfailingly silent that you sometimes forget she breathes. Together, you inspect visitors for contraband secular books, flashy jewelry pastries with fillings deemed frivolous. A man arrives with candied pears. Sister Theodora confiscates them. Sticky temptation, she mutters. You glance at the basket longingly. Pears are rare, sinful even. Next comes a spice merchant from the east. His robes are saffron and sea blue. He bows low, too low. Peace be upon this holy place, he says, eyes darting toward the cloister garden, and upon its quiet angels. You raise an eyebrow. Quiet angels. That's new. Theodora clears her throat and motions for the inspection basket. You check his satchel nutmeg cloves, one tiny copper amulet in the shape of a turtle. Forbidden questionable. You pretend not to see it. The merchant's eyes catch yours. For a second less, a flicker of something recognition, mischief. Maybe he's just seen too many faces in too many abbeys. He's waved through. The day drags. Visitors come and go like wood smoke. Most are dull, some smell of sheep. One woman wrapped in russet wool and mystery pauses by the statue of Saint Felicity. She touches the foot bows her head and whispers something. When she turns away, you catch a glimpse of silver ink on her palms, arcane curling symbols that blink like sleep-deprived eyes. You don't tell anyone. You just file it away, like a moth between pages. At midday, you're released from the gate. You eat in silence lentils and bread again with one lonely plum at the center of your wooden plate. Sister Beatrix tries to trade her plum for your bread. You consider, decline. Regret it instantly. Then comes embroidery hour. You're grateful for the stillness, the predictability of needle and thread. Your fingers follow the pattern without thinking. Golden vines, blood-red flowers, a tiny lamb. Symbols of purity, or so they say, though the lamb's eyes keep turning out wrong. Too wide, too human. You glance around. Sister Marie has embroidered a phoenix on her sampler, not standard liturgical fare. Marie, you whisper, that's not allowed. She shrugs. Depends who sees it. And it's true. Rules here bend with the watcher. Outside the window, clouds swell like bruises. Rain is coming again. You can feel it in your molars. Later in the chapel, the sisters chant, Nun. The harmonies rise and fall like breath through cloth. You follow the melody, your voice low and steady. Singing has always been the one time you don't feel watched. After prayers, Father Augustine delivers a lecture on the moral dangers of excessive comfort. You imagine slipping a candied pear into his cassock mid-sermon. Sister Agnes coughs suddenly, and for one wild moment, you wonder if she read your thoughts. Then comes the announcement. The bishop's envoy arrives tomorrow. Augustine intones. Clean habits, clear eyes, minds untroubled by superstition. Ah, that last bit. That's aimed directly at you, because the wall in your dormitory has started humming. It's faint, fainter than breath, but it's there. A vibration beneath the plaster like someone humming through closed lips. You first noticed it 3 nights ago. You thought it was a dream. It isn't. You haven't told anyone. Yet. That night you stand barefoot in the dormitory after lights-out candle in hand. The flame flickers toward the crack. There's no draft, no noise. But when you place your palm against the wall, nothing. Then a pulse. A single beat like a second heartbeat beneath the stone. You jerk your hand back. The candle wavers. You look around. All the others sleep, their faces turned inward. You say a prayer, not your usual one. This one starts, please let me be wrong. You blow out the candle. Dawn smears itself across the sky like jam on hard bread, cloudy, reluctant, half-hearted. You're already dressed, of course. You barely slept. When you did, it was to dream of walls that breathed and bells that rang without pulling. The bishop's envoy is expected by mid-morning, and that means chaos in slow motion. Not loud, never loud. Just a rising hum of perfectly measured anxiety. The novices are scrubbing flagstones with a mix of vinegar, an old prayer water. It supposedly brings out a divine gleam. You sidestep the puddles. Your robe's hem has enough sins to answer for without smelling like a sacrament salad. In the refectory, Father Augustine is already pacing. He paces a lot when visitors come. Says it helps him think. Judging by the grim set of his mouth, he's thinking something deeply unpleasant. His crozier, far too ornamental for a man of austere principle, clinks with every third step. You make the mistake of asking what role you'll be playing today. You'll be part of the welcome procession, he says. Smile softly, not broadly. Broadness is for fools and drunkards. Got it. By mid-morning, the entire cloister has assumed the posture of spiritual receptivity, which mostly means hands folded, eyes humble, and spines very, very straight. The main gate has been swept and reswept. Sister Theodora's eyes are scanning every hem and hairpin like a customs inspector on penance duty. And then the envoy arrives. A simple carriage, but with horses too fine to be modest. A driver with a feathered cap just low enough not to be ostentatious, just high enough to suggest we could be fancy if we wanted. The envoy himself steps out wearing pale blue robes edged in thread of gold. He moves like someone who's never once doubted where to place his feet. He bows. Everyone bows lower. My greetings, he says, voice syrupy with court training. May the peace of St. Ulrich guard your walls. And may your teeth rot from smiling like that you think, but only on the inside. Introductions begin. Sister Agnes flubs a name. Father Augustine twitches. The envoy surveys the cloister with lazy calculation. He notices the embroidery displayed for inspection, the polished altar vessels, the novice with the unfortunate cowlick. And then, yes, he sees you. His gaze lingers just long enough to wrinkle your thoughts. You, he says, motioning with a gloved hand. What's your name? You give it. Steady voice, folded hands. And your role, scriptorium assistant, herbal assistant, occasional cleaning. He hums, versatile. You're not sure if it's a compliment or a threat. Inside, the tour begins. You trail behind the official group far enough to be invisible close enough to hear what's being said. The envoy asks very pointed questions. Have there been any unusual weather patterns? No more than usual, Augustine replies smoothly. Any visions among the sisters? Only those sanctioned by canon. Any instances of anomalous architecture? You frown. What does that even mean? The envoy stops before a wall fresco of Saint Ursula, surrounded by arrows. Has this been restored recently, he asks. No, says Augustine, just well preserved. The envoy places a palm flat against the wall. You catch your breath. Because that fresco, it's directly across from the wall that hums in your dormitory. He doesn't seem to notice anything odd. Or maybe he does. His eyes flick to yours, then away like a stone skipping water. Later during the midday meal, the envoy eats sparingly. A few lentils, a bite of cheese. He refuses the wine, but requests boiled water with clove. When Sister Beatrix offers him extra bread, he declines with a smile so thin it's practically parchment. Then dessert candied quince. Everyone takes one. He does not. Too sweet, he says. You eat yours slowly, wondering if he knows about the wall. After lunch, he asks to see the archives. Not for scrutiny, he says, purely curiosity. Augustine hesitates. The archives are under Sister Honorine's care, and she is both deaf and entirely unthreatened by hierarchy. She allows the envoy in, but not without a sniff. He walks between the shelves as if they're old friends he's slightly disappointed in. He stops at a leather-bound tome titled Relic Transfers and Intershrine Disputes Volume 4. He opens it. Page 132. As if he knew exactly what he was looking for. You crane your neck, but all you see are spidery Latin notes and an ink blot shaped like a weeping angel. Then he closes its sighs and says, "Sometimes answers stay hidden by mutual agreement." What does that mean? You retreat to the herb garden for afternoon duties, still replaying his words. You chop few label jars, stir a wormwood infusion. The garden smells of time and quiet warnings. Sister Marie sneezes from the mint bush. You press your palm against a sun-warmed clay jar and try to steady your thoughts. Because here's the truth, the wall still hums. Last night it pulsed 3 times. Regular, not like breath, like code. And now someone from the bishopric shows up asking about architecture. Too many coincidences. At Vespers, the choir stalls echo with somber chants. The envoy stands silently behind the last pew, watching. Not joining, just watching. You can feel his eyes more than his presence. That night, your dormitory feels unusually cold. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling beams. Around you, the others breathe in the rhythm of old comfort. You wait. And yes, it returns. The hum. But now it's changed. Fainter. Intermittent. Like someone turning a page very, very slowly on the other side of stone. You rise. Cross the floor. Bare feet on cold flagstone. Press your hand to the wall. This time the pulse comes with a sound. Not humming. Whispering. Not words. Not yet. But whispering. And then, footsteps behind you. You spin. It's the envoy. Candle in one hand, the other raised palm out, not threatening, just present. He nods toward the wall. You hear it too, he says. You don't answer, you don't need to. Good, he says. That makes things much, much simpler. Which, of course, is the last thing you want to hear. You follow him. Of course you do. What else is there to do? The candle he carries burns with a bluish flame, subtle, steady, unnatural. You pass through a corridor you've known your whole life, and yet now it feels like a stage set, repurposed. Curtains drawn back, waiting for new lines to be spoken. He stops at the archway near the sacristy, murmurs something under his breath. You blink. The arch shifts, not visibly, not to the eye, but you feel it, as though the stone has rearranged its attention. The space thickens. Something listens. You'll need this, he says, handing you a slip of vellum etched with tightly cramped glyphs. Don't read it aloud. Just hold it when we go in. We. Oh yes, he says, it only opens for pairs. And then he presses his palm flat against the wall. The stones don't move. Not exactly, but they part slightly like a crowd making room for someone too important to touch. You both step through, inside a spiral stair. Narrow, wet, lit by nothing and everything. Your footsteps echo like someone else's. How long has this been here, you whisper? Longer than the convent, longer than the bishopric, possibly longer than Latin. The spiral ends in a small chamber, hexagonal, lined with carved alcoves. Each holds a bundle of cloth tightly wrapped and sealed with wax. Bones, probably. But not bones of saints. These were the first, the envoy says. Not founders, not martyrs. Witnesses. To what? He doesn't answer. Instead, he kneels at the center of the chamber and begins humming. Not like the wall hum, but a musical note, low and clear. The bundles shudder, and the wall behind them opens. You half expect flame or wind or some special effect of divine magnitude. What you get is a library, not shelves, strata. Books embedded in stone pages, woven into bark scrolls grown like fruit from twisted vines of script. Some glow faintly, some breathe. This is not theology, this is not magic, this is not science. This is before all of them. You step inside. The moment you do, your palm warms, the vellum charm reacting. The text on it unknots itself in your hand, the letters rearranging into diagrams, then fading. The envoy looks at you sharply. You're compatible. With what? He just gestures to the room. Somewhere behind a pillar of etched slate, a heartbeat begins. Not yours, not his. The library is alive, and it has noticed you. You do not panic. That's important. Or rather, you do panic, but in the quiet, respectable way of someone suppressing a sneeze at a royal wedding. Your spine stiffens. Your lips purse. Your hands fold like badly disciplined origami. The envoy watches you, then nods as if you've passed some invisible test. Follow only where the light touches, he says, stepping forward into the stone-grown archive. You blink. There is no light. Except now, there is. A kind of glow, not from any candle or flame, but from the pages themselves. Certain books emit it faintly like moonlight under frost. Others pulse gently, as if breathing. You follow. The shelves, if they can be called that, spiral upward and downward into uncertainty. The walls whisper not in voices, but in ideas, concepts that hover near your ear like gnats made of meaning. You hear flesh clock and weather tasting and salt that remembers music. They aren't words so much as the outlines of forgotten ones. This, the envoy murmurs, is where doctrine fails, where curiosity begins. You pass a panel carved with concentric circles. The spaces between them are filled with sigils that seem to rotate only when you're not looking directly at them. A very old nun once told you about this place, though she called it something else, the Garden of Impossible Footnotes. You thought she was senile. Now you wonder if she was just tired of explaining. One chamber contains nothing but eyes, painted, preserved, illustrated in golden ink on vellum, stretched so thin it flutters when you exhale. Each one stares. None blink. Another chamber is full of hands, bronze castings, clay impressions, delicate embroidery of gestures, mid-blessing, mid-damnation. One hand, carved from greenish ivory, extends toward you and closes slowly into a fist as you pass. You pretend not to notice. You pause before a scroll resting on a lectern of salt. The scroll is bound with hair, yours perhaps, or someone else's, who once looked like you. You glance at the envoy. He raises an eyebrow. It's not meant to be opened yet. Be patient. Yet. Some pages read you, he says. Some must wait until you're ready to be read. You make a note of that, mentally. The physical kind might attract attention here. A staircase leads down into a vault, labeled only with a single glyph, a circle with a thorn piercing its bottom. The envoy doesn't approach. We don't go there, he says. Why not? It only opens when you ask the wrong question. Which is, you'll know or you won't. Either way, you'll regret it. The walls pulse once in agreement or a warning. The book he's looking for, he finally admits, is called the Librum Sibilantem, the hissing book. No one is certain what it contains, only that it was last heard whispering beneath the siege psalter near the shelf that bleeds every Easter. You feel oddly relieved to hear something so specific. The air changes as you descend deeper. The parchment smell grows richer, less ink, more skin. You pass a row of tomes bound not in leather, but in bark with stitched leaf lettering. One of them opens on its own as you pass. Its pages flip quickly as though irritated you didn't stop to read. Eventually, the path narrows to a corridor of bone tiles, each inscribed with a single numeral. The envoy hums again, this time a different tone. The bones light up one by one until they spell out a combination: 73, 19, 5. Do I want to know what that means? You whisper. It's a hymn, or a password, or a date. Historians still argue whether it was encoded by a saint or just a bored archivist. At last you reach a small plinth carved into the wall. It holds nothing until it does. The book appears not with a flash or puff, but slowly as if emerging from memory. Black cover, unmarked, breathing softly. The hissing book. You both stare at it. Touch nothing yet, the envoy murmurs. But we came all this way, and now we wait. For what? For it to notice us. The book opens its cover just slightly. A sigh escapes. A breath of dry leaves, old ash, and ink mixed with something older than ink. You do not scream, but something inside you starts rewriting itself. The book doesn't move again. It simply waits open, just a sliver enough to let its presence leak into the space like steam from a cracked teapot. You stand there, breath shallow as the air takes on the dense hush of a confession booth at midnight. Whatever happens next, it feels unrepeatable. The envoy tilts his head toward the hissing book. Speak. You blink. Me. It won't open unless it hears a question, and not just any question, a hungry one. You try to think. What would make a book lean forward? Not facts, not names or dates, but something with teeth, something that it doesn't get asked often. You feel it then like an itch behind your ribcage, the question you didn't know you were carrying. What was the first lie the palace ever told? The book opens. Not all the way, just one page. But it's enough. The script is unfamiliar angled lines and spirals that look like calligraphy translated through a fever dream. But your eyes adjust. Or the letters change. It's hard to tell. The words settle into a shape you can almost read. It begins with a banquet. Golden plates, steaming saffron rice, goblets of pomegranate wine that stain the lips like secrets. The emperor, possibly Akbar, though the features shift slightly with every blink, is smiling at a guest whose name has been deliberately erased. Not scratched out, smoothed, as if memory itself was melted there. A servant enters carrying a covered dish. Beneath the lid, not food, but a mirror. The guest sees their own face reflected upside down. The emperor laughs. Everyone else follows. The mirror cracks silently. That was the lie that the laughter meant safety. You feel it settle behind your sternum. It's not knowledge. It's knowing. The difference is subtle and permanent. The envoy sighs. It always starts with that one. He gently closes the book, which responds like a well-trained pet submissive satisfied. You expect to leave, but no, he turns deeper into the stacks. There's one more. It's not for reading, just seeing. You follow because of course you do. This room is smaller, no books. Just a pedestal under a veil of gauze. He pulls it back. A diorama. Or possibly a curse. It's a miniature of the palace, the very one you've been navigating all this time. Every corridor, courtyard, arch, and staircase. But alive. Tiny people bustle through the model. You spot a speck-sized version of yourself moving through the charbog, lifting a slice of melon with absurd delicacy. You watch yourself. In the model, you're now walking down the archive stairs. It's following you. Perfectly. How? You begin. It sees you, the envoy whispers. All the versions of you. Why? To remember what you forget. You step back unnerved. Who made it? No one, he says. It grew. The air feels thinner. The parchment walls creak. Somewhere above a bell chimes not a real bell, but the memory of one. "You're ready now," says the envoy. "For what?" He gestures to the far end of the room where a door waits, no knob, no handle. Just an embossed image, a hand cupping a flame. It opens as you near it. Of course it does. The next space is empty. Not dusty, not dark, just blank. And then, very softly, music. Not from instruments, but from patterns, geometric, recursive, humming with something like harmony. The room is singing its own architecture. This, the envoy says, is where the real history happens, the part no one writes down. You squint. A shimmer moves across the far wall. It's ink, wet ink, writing itself. You edge closer. A single sentence slowly forming. Serenity is performance. You laugh too loudly. It echoes like heresy, but you can't help it. Of all the dangerous truths to leave undocumented, that one feels the most personal. The envoy smiles, and performance is survival. He turns to you. You've seen enough. You nod. You have. More than you know how to carry, but also strangely less burden than before, as if the knowledge rearranged you to make space for itself. As you retrace your steps, you notice changes. The books no longer watch. The air has shifted from awe to acceptance. You pass a shelf of dried flowers pressed into papyrus. One blooms as you approach, just briefly, then closes again. You don't ask why. You emerge back into the outer archive. The doors swing shut behind you with the quiet finality of a sigh. The corridor ahead leads back toward sunlight. Real sunlight this time, not metaphor. You feel the heat of it already warming the jolly carved shadows on the floor. And you realize you'll never walk these halls the same way again. Not because they've changed, but because now you know what they remember. The sunlight tastes different now. That's not a metaphor. It actually tastes faintly like cardamom and burnt sugar memory's palate, adjusting to its new contours. You emerge from the archives with your spine a little straighter, your senses sharpened. It's not pride, it's preparedness. You are in the corridor again, but everything's louder, quieter, more itself. A eunuch passes, nods, and for the first time you wonder how much he knows. Maybe all of it. Maybe none. That's the terrifying thing about people who never speak unless absolutely necessary. They leave you no breadcrumbs. You smile slightly, just enough to acknowledge without inviting. He moves on. Lunch is close. You follow the scent trail, ginger tamarind, a hint of ghee clinging to the corners of the air. It winds you back toward the inner kitchens, a sanctum rarely seen by courtiers, but you've been summoned, not with words, with glances. That's how these things happen. The Mughal kitchen is a cathedral of fire and steam. Great earthen tandoors open like stone mouths. Iron griddles hiss beneath rivers of lentil batter. A woman stirs a copper cauldron with a ladle the size of a cricket bat, her arms bare to the elbow, dusted in flour and authority. She doesn't look up. This is not a place for idle speech. Here, every gesture has lineage. A flick of the wrist learned from 3 generations before. The fold in a samosa, passed down like scripture. Even the way the rice is rinsed twice, then spun in a shallow pan, holds ancestral gravity. You don't belong here, but you're allowed to watch, for now. The head cook, a man with a beard so precise it could slice turmeric, finally addresses you. Sit there. You obey, perching on a small stool between 2 stacks of dried mango. You've eaten palace food. Now you will learn its motive. That's not ominous at all. He snaps his fingers and a servant appears with a wooden tray. 3 small bowls. 3 smells. Bowl 1 rice infused with saffron and rose water. Bowl 2 lentils boiled in bone broth and cinnamon bark. Bowl 3 something unfamiliar. Dark green, smoky, with a scent like forest rain. You hesitate. It's not poison, the cook grunts. It's clarity. You taste carefully. The flavors hit like verses, first sweet, then deep, then sharp. Each bowl tells a story, but not of ingredients, of intentions. Food here is not for sustenance, he says. It's persuasion. You frown and he nods as if confirming a secret. Sweetness disarms. Salted things build trust. Bitterness humbles. He waves toward a line of young cooks grinding spices with mortars the size of baby goats. Every dish is a speech, sometimes a warning. You think back to the spiced jasmine drink in the courtyard, that floating cloud feeling. It wasn't just refreshment, it was encouragement, gentle-scented compliance. Historians still argue whether the Mughal cuisine was primarily for nourishment or for negotiation. But here in this cathedral of heat, the debate feels irrelevant. You taste your own role now, not guest. Ingredient. Lunch is ready, the head cook says, rising. You follow him through a side door, hidden, of course, into a cool corridor lined with stone shelves. On each rests a single covered platter, steaming faintly beneath dome-shaped lids. Not labeled, but not random. He gestures. Yours. You carry it like a relic. The formal dining hall when you arrive is already humming. Not with speech, no one dares yet, but with posture. Everyone sits just so. Elbows in. Shoulders down. The choreography of digestion as diplomacy. The emperor hasn't arrived, yet his absence is the loudest thing in the room. You place your platter down and uncover it. Inside a small mound of lamb pilaf, a ribbon of mango pickle, and a round of warm buttered roti, folded like an envelope. No spoon. You tear the bread delicately and begin. Every bite is watched, not obviously, but you know. To eat too fast is to reveal nervousness. To eat too slow is to insult the cook. To clear your plate, risky, greedy, possibly desperate. You leave 2 mouthfuls. Someone across the table gives a near-invisible nod. You've passed the first test. Just then the emperor enters. All rise, bow, sit. His robe today is teal stitched with silver clouds. His turban bears a single ruby gleaming like a sealed eye. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The silence rearranges itself around him like a willing bride. A poet begins to recite. Not directly to the emperor, of course. That would be gauche. He recites to the room, his gaze fixed on the ornamental frieze above the emperor's head. Beneath the neem tree and dreams of fire, the soul eats what the mouth cannot bear. People murmur, "Wah." You echo it, "Wah." Your tone is exactly 83% sincere, 17% performative awe. Perfect ratio. As the meal continues, messengers arrive with folded missives. Small scrolls tucked into lacquered boxes. Each recipient reads, nods, eats slightly faster or slower, depending on the contents. This is not multitasking. This is feasting as diplomacy. You receive none, which as far as you can tell is exactly what you want. A young prince, possibly 12, possibly 22. The coal makes it hard to tell, spills a bit of chutney on his sleeve. A eunuch is there instantly with a cloth soaked in rose water. The prince's blush rises like dawn. He stares hard at his bread as if demanding it rewrite the moment. A juggler enters. You blink. Yes, a juggler. He balances a dagger, a peach, and a quill. Allegory, Obviously, you applaud softly with the others, the correct rhythm, not too excited, not too bored. Enthusiasm is a knife with two edges here. At last the emperor speaks. May your meals be meaningful. He rises. Everyone else follows. The lunch is over. You exhale. Not relief. Not yet. But digestion begins not in the stomach, you realize. It begins in the eyes of the room. You file out with the rest. Same rules as before, match the pace, neither eager nor sluggish. And as you pass through the hall, you hear a whisper from behind a column. Next comes the hunt. You pause. That was not metaphor. The hunt. You assumed it meant gossip, politics, some courtly metaphor for maneuvering. But within the hour, you're on horseback under the blistering late afternoon sun, gripping leather reins that smell like oiled parchment and anxiety. The Mughal hunt is not recreation. It is a statement of control over land beasts' time and the narrative of power. You ride in formation, not because anyone told you to, but because the lines form themselves like iron shavings to a magnet. Nobles in embroidered vests steer sleek horses. Archers ride side saddle with uncanny grace. Even the falconers look like generals. And at the front, of course, the emperor draped in peacock hues, his hawk perched with imperial disdain on his wrist. The terrain shifts fast. Stone courtyards give way to dust tracks, then to sunburned scrubland, veined with thorn bushes. Every hoofbeat kicks up history. You pass villagers who kneel instinctively. Children peek from behind acacia trees, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and calculation. Then movement. A deer, slender silver-backed, darting between the trees like a misplaced brushstroke. The emperor raises his hand. The procession stills. Total silence save for wind and hooves breathing. He signals. The hawk launches. Its wings cleave the air like shears through silk. It arcs once, twice, then plunges. Feathers erupt. The deer falls. There is no cheer, only acknowledgement. And then movement resumes. You ride past the fallen animal. Its eye is still open. Reflecting sky may be regret. You meet its gaze, and for a second something ancient tugs at your ribs. A eunuch makes a mark in a small ledger. The kill is recorded, categorized, counted. The emperor dismounts. So does everyone else. There will be a feast, yes, but first ritual. A circle forms around the animal. Incense is lit. Words are murmured. Gratitude is paid, though it feels more like tax than prayer. You kneel because everyone else kneels. You whisper because silence is louder than voice here. Then, with practiced ease, the emperor draws a small blade from his boot, curved, clean, ceremonial. He presses it to the deer's throat, not to wound, but to mark. A symbol. A seal of imperial dominion over life's final punctuation. Blood dots the earth like rubies in sand. And then just as suddenly it's over. The deer is carried away. The emperor remounts. The procession resumes. As you ride, someone beside you murmurs, "He only hunts when something needs reminding." You don't ask what or whom. Back at the palace, dusk bleeds into the sky. The air smells of clove smoke and anticipation. The deer will be prepared for the emperor's evening meal. Not for you, not for most, but you're invited to observe. The butcher's courtyard is already lit, lanterns strung like amber moons, shadows dancing in tandem with cleavers and ladles. The meat is being seasoned with crushed coriander, and a story about a general who once outwitted 3 princes using only a parable and a bowl of soup. That's the thing here. Flavor is never just about taste. It's context. It's a message. As the haunch is skewered and lowered into flame, you catch sight of the Emperor again, this time alone, watching the fire. His hawk perched above him on a timber beam, preening. He sees you and nods. It is not invitation, it is observation. You have entered his line of sight. You now exist in it. Tomorrow, who knows? But tonight, you are still within the margins of the script. And as smoke curls skyward, mingling with the stars and their invisible bureaucracies, you finally understand. In this empire, nothing is untheatrical, not even silence. Especially not silence. The feast. The transition from the hunt to the banquet is seamless, like one of those strange dreams where the landscapes morph without warning. The Emperor's hunting lodge, if such a term could even be applied to this structure, is immediately forgotten as you find yourself ushered into an air-conditioned hall of polished stone floors, gilded arches, and rows upon rows of low benches laden with carefully arranged silver platters. The space smells like cumin rosewater, and that subtle, almost imperceptible sweetness of butter, blending seamlessly with the heavy scent of freshly baked flatbreads and charred meats. Your stomach growls not out of hunger, but out of a conditioned expectation that here in the presence of power you will consume with grace. And yet it's not the food that catches your attention. It's the people. As with every meal at the Mughal court, everything is scripted. Every gesture, every word, every glance is a performance woven together into a continuous symphonic drama. You've witnessed it before. These are not individuals merely eating. No, they are actors in a carefully choreographed display. To refuse food would be unthinkable. To take too much would be just as unforgivable. Every choice here is a balance of formality, restraint, and subtlety. The Emperor enters last, as always. He moves through the hall with such deliberate slowness that it almost feels like time itself has been coaxed into standing still. His robes, an iridescent kaleidoscope of jewel-toned silks, shimmer with each step, setting off a faint flutter among the courtiers. There is no applause. There never is. Applause is for crowds. This is the court. Everything is muted, controlled. You bow your head as he passes, maintaining your poise as you watch the procession unfold. He pauses only for a moment to greet a nobleman seated near the front, an exchange of nods, a passing word about the weather perhaps. Nothing extravagant. Just an acknowledgement, like a ripple on the surface of a pond. You keep your eyes trained on your own plate. The waiter places a silver chalice before you, filled with a warm drink that smells like mint and honey. It's called sharbat, an elixir of sorts, meant to refresh both body and spirit. You take a sip, and though it tastes much sweeter than you had anticipated, you hide your surprise behind a neutral expression. Across from you, a young nobleman lifts a leg of lamb to his mouth, his movements exaggeratedly elegant. It's as if he's aware of the courtly eyes upon him. He doesn't merely eat. No, he feasts with the poise of someone who knows that the very act of dining is a reflection of his character. You, too, take a bite of your own lamb, cutting a delicate slice. There is no joy here, not in the traditional sense. The joy lies in how well you manage to eat without disturbing the perfect choreography of the banquet. Your movements are slow, precise, each gesture calculated to fit the larger performance of the evening. Your mouth moves in rhythm with the other courtiers, the clinking of utensils becoming part of the soundtrack of controlled indulgence. There are, of course, moments of levity. a whispered joke, a quiet chuckle. You can feel the subtle currents of tension shifting ever so slightly among the nobility. Certain looks exchanged, certain glances that linger just a bit too long. But even these moments are executed with the utmost caution. No one laughs too loudly. No one speaks too much. The feast is a place of indulgence, yes, but also of restraint. A servant places a bowl of kheer before you, a dish of rice pudding flavored with cardamom, saffron, and rose water. It's warm, sweet, and fragrant. You eat it slowly, savoring the contrast between the rich spices and the delicate texture of the rice. Across from you, a poet murmurs something about the sweetness of justice, as if the kheer had inspired such thoughts. Someone else replies as expected with the word wah, the official court exclamation of awe. It is a perfunctory utterance. No one truly listens, but it is part of the dance, the performance, the constant subtle validation of the emperor's power of the imperial narrative being woven with each shared bite. And through it all, you feel yourself being swept along in the tide. The emperor seated at the far end of the hall is the unspoken center of the entire display. Everyone's movements, however graceful, however imperceptible, revolve around him. The gestures of the courtiers, the slow passing of platters, the gentle hum of conversation, it all takes place in his shadow, a silent acknowledgement of his dominion over not just the land, but over the very acts of consumption and presentation. You catch a glimpse of the emperor again as he raises a cup to his lips, the flicker of his gaze falling upon you for a fleeting moment. His expression is unreadable, as always, but in that brief moment you realize something crucial. You are not here to eat. You are here to be seen eating. You return to your plate, your gestures, your movements all carefully calibrated to maintain the illusion of ease. You are part of the court's grand performance, as much a symbol as the ornate chalice before you, the golden platters, and the carefully arranged feasts. The emperor may be the master of the spectacle, but you, like everyone else, are a player. You finish your meal, of course, slowly, thoughtfully. Your senses are dulled by the steady rhythm of the evening, the mix of sweet and savory flavors that coat your tongue, the quiet chatter of courtly matters that never quite seem to reach their conclusion. And as the final course is served, golden pastries filled with almonds and honey, you rise from your seat already anticipating the next performance. Because in this empire the feast is never truly over. It simply continues with each course, each conversation, each gesture, adding another layer to the grand narrative of power and presence. The departure. The banquet begins to dissolve into polite murmurs, the last morsels of food carefully consumed, the final cups drained with slow elegance. You remain seated for a moment longer than most, feeling the weight of your place at the table settle on your shoulders. It's not an unpleasant weight, more like a thick velvet robe that cloaks you in importance. Still, it's a relief to see the first few courtiers begin to rise, their movements calculated but unhurried, as if they've rehearsed this exit 100 times over. There is a quiet ripple of activity, a subtle reshuffling as the tables are cleared, and the imperial servants move with fluid grace to sweep away the remnants of the meal. You, too, stand the delicate clink of your goblet against the stone floor, the only sound for a moment. You've learned the timing well, just enough to avoid lingering too long, but not so soon as to appear impatient. The fine line between civility and impatience is razor thin here. You stand among the other nobles waiting for the final nod. The emperor has not yet risen, and thus no one else dares to move until he does. His figure remains almost statuesque at the head of the hall, his presence commanding the space, even in stillness. For now, all eyes remain on him. But when he stands, when his gilded sandals shift with measured deliberation, the others will follow. At last the emperor rises. It is subtle, this motion, a shift in his posture, a slight exhale that's almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. But you feel it like a spark that ignites the room. Every single person in the hall is now moving, though no one rushes. The decorum is upheld. The banquet is over. And yet it is only now that you realize once again that the entire evening was a performance, a well-rehearsed spectacle. As the nobles file out, each one moving to their designated parting spot, like pieces on a game board, you follow suit. But your movements are not automatic. They are part of the same script everyone else is following. The court may be finishing its meal, but the game, you know, is far from over. The emperor walks slowly, each step measured, deliberate, and you take care to follow a little behind, maintaining the distance required by your station. The quiet shuffle of feet on stone is the only sound that fills the hall, now a rhythm that continues even outside the banquet hall's walls. As you pass through the ornate doors and into the outer courtyard, a sharp chill bites at your skin. The night air is cool, but your body is warmed by the evening's indulgences, both the food and the atmosphere. The moon hangs high in the sky, an ethereal glow casting long shadows across the stone paths. You take a moment to adjust your robe, smoothing down the fabric and ensuring that it remains perfectly in place as it should. The evening light is softer here, muted by the large stone walls that separate the palace grounds from the vast, dark world beyond. The sounds of the banquet have faded, but the smell of spices still lingers in the air. You walk with the other nobles, careful to keep your gaze straight ahead, just as you've been trained. To look too far left or right might signal curiosity. Curiosity could lead to suspicion. You spot a few women from the zenana dressed in muted silks, their expressions veiled behind delicate screens of gauze. There's a momentary flicker of eye contact with one of them, a brief, calculated acknowledgement. You feel the weight of her gaze, but you do not return it. That would be breaking the rules. Instead, you continue your walk, your pace measured, each step calculated. Soon, the procession begins to thin as courtiers peel off to their designated chambers or other areas within the palace complex. You too part ways with the group, taking the path toward the guest quarters. The towering walls seem to close in on you, their imposing height a reminder of the unspoken rules of the Mughal court. No one is ever truly alone here. Not really. You are never truly free from the watchful eyes of the palace, the emperor, and your fellow courtiers. But in this moment, as you make your way toward your private chambers, you experience a fleeting sense of release. The performance of the evening is over. You have played your part well. No missteps, no awkward pauses, no signs of fatigue. You have been a part of the larger narrative, a minor character in the play that is the Mughal court, and for now, that is enough. The cool air is a welcome contrast to the warmth of the banquet hall. You breathe deeply, but you do not linger in the moment. There is always more to the story, always more to do. As you reach your quarters and step inside, you close the door softly behind you. The quiet surrounds you, and for the first time that evening, You allow yourself to relax just for a moment. The stars outside your window twinkle faintly in the sky, the softest of whispers, like the last note of a long drawn-out song. And just as you begin to unwind, you know that tomorrow will bring a new performance, a new set of rules to navigate. But tonight, at least, you have passed the test. The morning after. The sun rises early in the Mughal Empire, even before the first light spills over the horizon. But the early hours are for the emperor's private moments, quiet, intimate, and entirely free from the public eye. The courtiers, however, have other rules to follow. They must appear to rise with the dawn to maintain the appearance of discipline, the outward sign of their loyalty and respect for the structure of the court. You are already awake even before the palace bells chime their first call to the day. The air is still cool, and there is a soft peace that blankets the palace before the true bustle begins. But it is a fleeting calm. You stretch out on your bed, adjusting the layers of silk and cotton beneath you. There is an elegance to the way the beds are arranged, each one perfectly symmetrical, a harmonious blend of function and beauty. The room is silent save for the distant murmur of palace servants making their rounds. There are no loud sounds to disturb your thoughts, no jarring noises to announce the day. It is all carefully planned. The palace, like the court itself, operates on a set schedule, each action a part of a grand design. Breakfast will be served promptly, but not too early. The day will unfold in a carefully measured rhythm, just as last night's banquet did. And before you know it, you will be moving through the day, each gesture, each word, carefully executed to fit into the larger structure of palace life. You sit up, stretching your limbs slowly, the silken sheets falling away from your body with practiced ease. You have time to adjust, time to prepare for the day's next set of expectations. A servant enters, her head bowed in silent respect, and she places a tray of warm water beside you. The scent of rose petals wafts up from the water, mingling with the faint smell of spices, lingering from the previous evening's feast. She leaves without a word, and you are left alone with your thoughts. The palace is a place of silence in the early morning. It's the kind of silence that you could almost believe to be a personal space, a gift just for you. But you know better. Every move you make here is watched. Every step is a calculated one. The rules that governed your behavior yesterday will govern today as well. There is a knock at the door, the sharp, courteous sound of wood against wood. You rise, steadying your robes as you open the door to reveal a fellow courtier, another noble in impeccable attire. Their face is calm neutral like yours, the outward mask that all the courtiers wear. But beneath that mask, you know that everyone feels the weight of the empire, the quiet pressure to perform at all times. Your fellow courtier gestures to the hallway, signaling that it's time for you to move. It's time for the day's rituals to begin. Time to maintain the appearance of grace, to glide smoothly through the halls of the palace as though everything were effortless. You nod, moving silently behind them. The halls are already filled with the soft hum of the morning whispers of servants, the faint clinking of metal, the low murmur of voices preparing for the day ahead. You walk with the same careful deliberation as yesterday, but there is a slight difference in the air today. Perhaps it's the lingering echoes of last night's formalities, or perhaps it's the knowledge that today you will again be a part of the great performance that is Mughal life. As you approach the palace courtyard, you can see others already assembling, preparing for the rituals of the morning. The Charbagh courtyard stretches out before you, The symmetry of the stonework and water channels, almost hypnotic in its precision. The scent of fresh blooms mingles with the faint tang of the earth, and you wonder how many of these courtiers take the time to truly notice it. The courtiers gather in the same positions as though each one were an actor entering a stage set. The emperor has not yet emerged from his chambers, but you know that once he does, the entire palace will fall into motion again. For now, you simply wait. A servant brings you a bowl of fruit carefully sliced and arranged. You take a small piece, biting into it slowly, savoring the sweetness. You are careful as always. Greed would not be appropriate here. The silence remains, but beneath it, there is a sense of anticipation. The day is beginning, and with it, the performance continues. You are still a part of the game, and every action you take will be scrutinized, watched, and noted. The pressure is constant, but you have grown used to it. It is part of the performance. The emperor arrives, his presence commanding the attention of every single person in the courtyard. A brief nod from him, and the courtiers shift into motion once again, moving with a practiced fluidity that only those who have spent years in the palace can manage. The day is underway, and so once again you perform your role, silent, measured, graceful. It's what the court demands. The afternoon stretches on warm and languid under the shadow of the towering palace walls. The sun, having reached its zenith, casts long, lazy shadows through the ornate latticework of the jaili screens. You make your way to the halls, where the noblemen and women congregate yet again, navigating through this intricate choreography of behavior. Everything feels calculated: how fast you walk, how softly you speak, how carefully you engage in the conversation of the moment. Today, like any other, is a delicate dance. The court whispers. The slightest flicker of your gaze could speak volumes. The discussions at the marble tables feel more like performances than dialogues, each noble vying for attention, but doing so in the most subtle of ways. Their voices are low, barely above a murmur, but their eyes, those sharp eyes, are never still, constantly evaluating. You make sure not to falter, not to make a misstep. Being too forward, too eager, could ruin your standing in a heartbeat. You pass by one such conversation. Two courtiers, their posture rigid and formal, lean forward slightly, their faces masked in polite curiosity. They exchange seemingly innocuous pleasantries, talk of the weather, the latest poetry, the state of the empire, but it's the unspoken that lingers. Behind the facade of civility, the real conversations are happening. A subtle gesture, the way one courtier's hand rests too casually on the table, or the way another slightly tilts their head, indicating the smallest hint of agreement. These details matter. They will be remembered. You sit in a corner of the hall, choosing the shadows of a nearby column, not quite in the thick of things, but close enough to observe. As a distant observer, you can almost feel the tension in the air, palpable, invisible, like a delicate web stretched too thin. Every gesture could be the wrong one. Even a moment of relaxed conversation, a laugh shared too freely, could be misinterpreted. So you keep your demeanor neutral, poised, only ever offering the smallest of smiles, just enough to be seen, not enough to be remembered too deeply. A servant approaches with a fresh cup of sherbet, the pale pink liquid gleaming in the midday light. You take it with careful hands, a subtle nod of gratitude. The sweet flavor tingles on your tongue, and you momentarily allow yourself to indulge in the sensation before quickly swallowing, remembering the balance you must maintain. Pleasure must always be restrained here. Too much enjoyment in the open could send the wrong message. Nearby, another group of courtiers is engaged in a light conversation about the empire's recent military campaigns. It's all formalities, of course. What use is any genuine conversation when the emperor's officials have already dictated the outcomes of such matters? But here in the corridors of the palace, everything has a purpose, even the most trivial topics. The conversation, while seemingly inconsequential, serves as a reminder of everyone's role in the great tapestry of the empire. No one speaks just to speak. Everything must align with the greater narrative. A young noblewoman steps forward, offering a polite smile as she takes her seat at the table near yours. She wears the colors of the court, indigo and gold, with a subtle shimmer to her silks. She's the perfect example of what it means to be a woman of the palace, poised, reserved, and always carefully playing her role. Her eyes briefly meet yours, and there's a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding. In this place you know better than to show too much interest, so you turn your attention back to the group across the room, pretending not to notice her presence. The laughter of the courtiers echoes soft yet lingering. You catch the sound, and for a moment it feels like a reminder that there's still something human about this place. Still something that moves beneath the surface of all the carefully constructed poise. But then, as quickly as it rises, the laughter subsides and the court returns to its rhythm, the social ballet once again in full motion. As the afternoon drifts towards its end, the sun dips lower, casting softer, more golden hues across the courtyard. You rise slowly, mindful of your posture, as always. The time for observation is coming to a close, and soon you'll once again step back into the rhythm of the court. As you glide toward the open veranda, you glimpse another noble passing by, his features masked in the same practiced expression you've seen 100 times. The same neutrality, the same careful distance. This is the price of maintaining one's position in the Mughal court, the constant dance, the performance of serenity, of being in control, even when the pressure is unbearable. The sun is now low, and the shadows have deepened across the courtyard. A breeze stirs the leaves of the neem tree, and you pause for a moment, letting the coolness touch your skin. Here in this space it's easier to breathe, but only for a second. Soon the performance will resume, and once again you'll fall into step with the others. You take a deep breath, standing tall with renewed focus. It's time to move, and you do so with purpose. This is no time to linger. As evening approaches, the vibrant pulse of the court begins to slow, though the air still hums with whispered conversations and the soft clinking of fine porcelain. The setting sun bathes the grand palace in an amber glow, and the courtyard, once a scene of calculated poise, now seems to shimmer with the golden afterglow of an endless performance. The coolness of the evening breeze begins to settle in, soothing the air after the heat of midday. But the tension remains an undercurrent that never fully dissipates. You observe the courtiers moving more slowly now, their steps more deliberate. There's an air of refinement to their movements that transcends the ritual of the day. This is no longer a mere courtyard. It's the stage of their lives, each one of them an actor playing a part so well rehearsed it's become second nature. No longer do they just occupy this space, they dominate it. Each glance, each subtle shift in posture is deliberate and intentional. At the far side of the garden, the procession begins to form. A minor noble enters the courtyard, stepping lightly through the delicate flower beds and neatly trimmed hedges. His tunic is richly embroidered, the intricate stitching catching the last rays of sunlight. His face is calm, composed, but beneath the smooth surface you can sense the underlying uncertainty. Perhaps he is late to some important gathering, or perhaps it's simply the weight of always having to perform in front of others. Either way, he doesn't falter. He never falters. To do so would be a grave mistake, and he knows it well. You watch as he passes by the fountains, the sound of water cascading against the stone almost musical in its cadence. The nobleman doesn't stop, but the slightest hint of his gaze lingers over the reflection in the water, catching a fleeting glimpse of his own image. It's a momentary lapse, a moment where the artifice fades just enough to reveal the person beneath. But it is gone as quickly as it comes. He straightens his back and continues onward, eyes focused ahead. The pace of the day quickens again. A pair of servants hurry past carrying trays laden with silver goblets and fruits, their faces downcast, too respectful to even glance at the courtiers. It's a world of hierarchy, this palace, and even those who serve are steeped in the performance. But even they, in their humility, are part of the spectacle. Their movements are swift, precise, perfectly in time with the rhythm of the palace. Nearby, two poets begin to exchange verses under the shade of a tree. Their words are rich with metaphor, their tones thick with meaning. The crowd gathers around them, nodding occasionally, murmuring their approval. It's all part of the act, of course. The poets know this. The courtiers know this. But still the performance must be honored. One poet gestures grandly with a hand, his fingers lightly tracing the air as though painting an invisible masterpiece. The other poet responds, his voice low and deliberate, clearly improvising but maintaining the perfect sense of composure. You catch the eyes of several other courtiers as they subtly move closer, observing with rapt attention, nodding in time with the poetic rhythm. To be seen appreciating the poetry is just as important as appreciating the words themselves. You sense a change in the atmosphere as the evening deepens. The shadows grow longer and the conversation shifts to lighter topics. Laughter bubbles up again, but this time it's more genuine. The stress of the day begins to ebb, replaced with the shared comfort of good company. But even here, amid the lighter moments, there's still a sense of distance, an invisible line that never fully crosses. The courtiers laugh together, but they also keep one eye on the shifting power dynamics. There is no room for complacency, no room for real relaxation. A familiar figure emerges from the shadows, a high-ranking official, his robe lined with gold thread and his head held high, his expression unreadable. He walks slowly, almost with a sense of authority, his gaze sharp as ever. As he crosses the courtyard, there's a subtle shift in the air. The courtiers stand a little straighter, their conversations slightly more muted. They exchange brief glances, but no one dares to speak above a whisper. He's the kind of figure whose presence demands respect, not just because of his rank, but because of the aura of unapproachability he exudes. To speak too boldly, to make the wrong move in his presence, could easily shift the tides of favor. You know better than to react. The courtiers are just beginning to speak again when a servant appears with a small tray of sweets. The smell of honey and saffron fills the air, and for a fleeting moment you allow yourself a small indulgence. It's the perfect distraction, a break from the endless performance. You allow yourself to sit for a moment alone in the shade to briefly relish in the simple pleasures. But even here within the cool embrace of the courtyard, you know you cannot forget the performance. Dinner draws closer, and the palace begins to stir again with preparations. The sound of footsteps grows louder as servants scurry across the marble floors, readying the tables and lining the halls. The air, now cool with the promise of evening, is filled with the scent of roasting meats and spiced rice, a promise of the meal to come. The court's rhythm is steady, unyielding like the heartbeat of an empire. And so once again the performance begins. Each of you, each noble and servant alike, must play your part in the great pageant of the palace. But as the evening deepens and the stars begin to twinkle overhead, you feel a sense of calm, like the world is momentarily at rest. Even if it's just for tonight. The air is thick with the anticipation of the evening's feast, but there's a quietness that settles over the courtyard as the final preparations are made. The rhythmic hustle of servants has softened into a gentle murmur, their movements now slow and deliberate. The opulent palace, with its towering walls and intricate architecture, seems to pause in a state of tranquility. The shadows cast by the dying sun stretch long across the stone pathways, blending seamlessly with the soft hues of the night that are slowly creeping in. You sit back on your bench, your posture impeccably straight, and allow yourself a few moments of reflection. You've survived the day, perhaps even thrived within the complicated layers of courtly etiquette and performance. But there's no true relaxation here, not yet. This is the moment where you and everyone else around you prepare for the final act of the day, the feast. It will be a performance in itself, the most anticipated spectacle of the evening, and everyone must play their part with the same precision and care they've shown throughout the day. As you shift your weight, trying to maintain the same serene expression that you've practiced so carefully, a slight breeze stirs the leaves of the neem tree above. It's a brief and gentle movement, but it serves as a reminder that there is still life beyond the palace walls, beyond the performances and the politics. For a split second, you almost allow yourself to feel something other than the constant vigilance of being watched and measured by the ever-watchful eyes of the court. A group of courtiers approaches the marble walkway, their robes sweeping across the stones with a graceful, synchronized fluidity. They walk in a formation as if they were part of a well-rehearsed dance. Their faces are masks of composure, each of them perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the palace. The only sounds are the soft rustling of their garments and the distant murmur of laughter from behind the silk curtains. As they pass, your gaze shifts ever so slightly toward the delicate patterns of the jolly lattice screens that line the courtyard. The way the light filters through the intricate design is almost mesmerizing, casting ever-changing shadows onto the ground. You wonder for a brief moment if those who built these screens intended for the shadows to hold such beauty. Or perhaps it's just another layer of illusion, another way to mask the reality of a world where everything is carefully staged, carefully arranged. The movement around you begins to shift again, and you see a servant approach with a tray laden with gleaming silver chalices and bowls of fruit. He stops just in front of you. His eyes lowered in respect, you smile faintly and nod in acknowledgement, taking a delicate slice of melon from the tray. As you do, you hear the soft murmur of the courtiers behind you, discussing the events of the day in hushed tones. Their conversation is of no consequence, yet it fills the air with a soft undercurrent of gossip and speculation. The breeze picks up again, rustling the leaves, in a more pronounced way this time. The temperature drops ever so slightly, and you pull your robe tighter around you, not out of discomfort, but to maintain the illusion of being perfectly poised in the face of the changing evening air. It is, after all about control, about maintaining a sense of unflappable calm, no matter what small fluctuations might occur around you. The evening has officially begun, and the last glimmers of the setting sun fade behind the horizon, leaving a dark velvet sky in its place. The stars begin to appear twinkling softly in the distance, as though they too are a part of this grand performance. The flickering torchlight around the courtyard casts long shadows against the walls, creating a scene that feels almost surreal, like a stage set for the most exquisite of plays. You rise from the bench, your movements graceful and measured. The feast is about to begin, and you must make your way to the hall. There's no room for hesitation here, no time for lingering. This is the moment where the day's performance transitions into a new act, one where the stakes are even higher. Every gesture, every movement must be carefully considered. The performance is far from over. As you walk toward the entrance, you pass by the servants, now moving quickly with their final preparations, making the finishing touches to the grand table set for the evening. Their faces are serious focused, and you can see the tension in their posture. They too are part of the performance, but their roles are less celebrated, less acknowledged. Still, their efforts are no less essential. Without them, this entire palace would crumble into disorder. The air is thick with the fragrance of roasting meats, and the distant sound of flutes and drums signaling the beginning of the evening's festivities. You can hear the laughter of the courtiers, now louder, more relaxed, as they begin to mingle in the great hall. But you know better than to get too comfortable. Here, too, in the grandeur of the banquet, every action is scrutinized. Every glance, every smile is calculated. To truly succeed here, to truly belong, you must not just participate in the performance, you must master it. You take your place among the other courtiers, your back straight, your expression serene. The food is brought out, and the hall fills with the sounds of clinking dishes, murmurs of approval, and polite laughter. But beneath it all, you remain aware. You remain vigilant. Because in this world of rituals, where even the smallest misstep can lead to a sudden fall from grace, the performance never truly ends. You glance around the room, noting the nobles seated in their places, the occasional glance exchanged between rivals. There's a moment of silence before the first course is served, a brief pause where everyone holds their breath waiting for the signal to begin. And then, with the slightest gesture, the banquet commences, and the court resumes its elaborate performance. As you take your first bite, you feel a sense of calm wash over you. But even here in the midst of the food and drink, you know the game continues. It's all part of the act. And as long as you play your part with grace and composure, you'll remain part of this magnificent world.